We're going to begin. I'd like you all to come in a bit closer if you can, please, towards the monument. Okay, I'd like to welcome you all. I'd like to welcome the families, particularly the families of the relatives and relatives of those who we are commemorating today. I'd like to thank and welcome Cobh Tourism, Jim O'Rourke, Liam O'Sullivan, representing Cobh Communities for Change, the Commodore Male Voice Choir, members of the ex-servicemen and women's organisation Cobh. I'd like to welcome and thank Conor Nelligan of Cork County Council, who gave us tremendous help over the last year to get where we are today with these monuments. And anyone else, I'd also like to thank and welcome the families living here in Westview who played a good part in making this what it is also today. We'll begin proceedings now by calling on the Commodore Male Voice Choir to sing Our On the Way In. I'd now like to call on Mrs. Betty Gilmartin, niece of Commander Michael Leahy, to lay the wreath on behalf of the relatives. Thank you, Betty. I'd ask you all now to stand for a minute's silence. Thank you. I now call on Paul O'Sullivan to read out the proclamation.
Public na Héireann, the Provisional Government of the Irish Republic to the people of Ireland. Irish men and Irish women, in the name of God and of the dead generations from which she receives her old tradition of nationhood, Ireland, through us, summons her children to her flag and strikes for her freedom. Having organised and trained her manhood through her secret revolutionary organisation, the Irish Republican Brotherhood, and through our open military organisations, the Irish Volunteers and the Irish Citizen Army, having patiently perfected her discipline, having resolutely waited for the right moment to reveal itself, she now seizes that moment, and supported by our exiled children in America, and by gallant allies in Europe, but relying in the first on her own strength, she strikes in full confidence of victory. We declare the right of the people of Ireland to the ownership of Ireland and to the unfettered control of Irish destinies to be sovereign and indefeasible. The long usurpation of that right by a foreign people and government has not extinguished the right, nor can it ever be extinguished except by the destruction of the Irish people. In every generation, the Irish people have asserted their right to national freedom and sovereignty. 6 times during the past 300 years, they have asserted it in arms. Standing on that fundamental right, and again asserting it in arms in the face of the world, we hereby proclaim the Irish Republic as a sovereign, independent state. And we pledge our lives and the lives of our comrades in arms to the cause of its freedom, of its welfare, and of its exaltation among the nations. The Irish Republic is entitled to, and hereby claims, the allegiance of every Irish man and Irish woman. The Republic guarantees religious and civil liberty, equal rights and equal opportunities to all its citizens, and declares its resolve to pursue the happiness and prosperity of the whole nation and of all its parts, cherishing all the children of the nation equally, and oblivious of the differences carefully fostered by an alien government which have divided a minority from the majority in the past. Until our arms have brought the opportune moment for the establishment of a permanent national government, representative of the whole people of Ireland and elected by the suffrages of all her men and women, the provisional government hereby constituted will administer the civil and military affairs of the Republic in trust for the people. We place the cause of the Irish Republic under the protection of the Most High God, whose blessing we invoke upon our arms. And we pray that no one who serves that cause will dishonour us by cowardice, inhumanity, or rapine. In this supreme hour, the Irish nation must, by its valour and discipline, and by the readiness of its children to sacrifice themselves for the common good, prove itself worthy of the august destiny to which it is called. Signed on behalf of the Provisional Government, Thomas J. Clark, Sean McDermott, Tomás McDonagh, Padraig Pearse, Eamon Cant, James Connolly, Joseph Plunkett.
Thanks, Paul. When we think about 1916 and the Rising, some of the things that immediately come to mind would be bravery, honour, courage. We might also think about a David and Goliath battle. We think about sacrifice, and without even trying to stop doing it, we might even think about what-ifs of history. For example, what if the German airship that was scuttled outside our harbour actually made it all the way to Kerry to the volunteers? What would have happened? What if McLeahy and his men that marched out from the Tay Road on Easter Saturday to join the Rising, what if the Rising actually happened in Cork and the rest of the country? What might it have been? What if the volunteers in Dublin, who had planned initially to take over the telephone exchange and cut off all outside contact with the outside world for the British, what if that came off? Would the whole complexion of the First World War have been different? What if? I'd like to think about another big what if from that period. A little bit before 1916, in September 1914, 500 volunteers gathered down in the Bats Hall, where the old cinema used to be, Tower Cinema, and they were going to decide the future of the volunteer movement in Cobh. it was mainly taken over by the Red Medite factions in favour of a constitutional pact. They were trying to get home rule in Ireland, but in doing so, had advised that the volunteers should fight in the war with the British. But 8 volunteers out of that 500 disagreed. They were led by McLeahy, who later went on to command the East Cork Brigade. And they said no. They said they joined the Irish Volunteers to defend the Irish people and achieve freedom for Ireland. They would not do that by fighting for Britain, their enemy. They got a very, very hostile reception. McLeahy himself reported that he got punched in the face before the walkout. Another volunteer with McLeahy that day, Paddy Whelan, in his witness statement to the Bureau of Military History 30 years later, he explained about the hostility and what they suffered down there. But he aptly described it as the people at the top table that day were no more or less recruiting sergeants for the British Army and Navy. And he added, strangely enough, no one in that room, all 500, not a single one of them went out and fought in the war afterwards, and either war. So the big what if there would be, what would have happened had McLeahy and the other 8 volunteers decided to take the easy path and go with the flow and not rebel, not dissent. Given that McLeahy himself and his colleague Seamus Fitzgerald were apprentices in the King's dockyard in Haulbowling, it would have been a lot easier for them just to go with the flow, but they didn't. They were different. They were a minority, a brave minority. You could ask yourself, if they didn't, would anyone turn out in Easter 1916 from Cobh? They wouldn't. It's very unlikely. And then, going on from that, who would have organised East Cork after the Rising? There would have been no one around to do it because the Cobh men had that job afterwards. They organised the whole of East Cork. They organised the East Cork Flying Column. They were the first to capture an RIC barracks in the whole of Ireland. When they captured Carrigtwood Barracks on the 2nd of January 1920, it was down to the Cobh men. They organised it, they carried it out, and they had the backing of all the East Cork volunteers, which they had organised in the preceding years. So that's a big what if of history. Had they not done that, history could have had a different story to tell us. We might well be living in a town that's still called Queenstown today. But for those 8 men that took a stand down in that hall and they said, no, we're not going to do it. We're going to fight for Ireland instead. So we are here today to honour those men as much as the 7 signatories of the proclamation, another small minority that stood up. They were small, they were brave, but they were right. And we are proof of that today. Thank you. Now I'd like to thank a few people. As we said, when you were here last year, we unveiled this monument. Since then, we have planted 7 trees in honour of the 7 signatories, and we've unveiled our new flagpole. I'd like to thank all those who sponsored the trees, and I'd like to give a special thanks to Eileen O'Loughlin for sponsoring our flagpole. And I'd like to thank, again, Cork County Council for their financial aid, and the Cobh Municipal Council for their financial aid also. Long may it continue, and for the work they do in maintaining the garden. And I'd like to give a special thank you to the residents of Westview for maintaining their part in this as well. Now, hopefully, when you come here next year, the garden will be complete. We will have our proclamation in situ, hopefully, somewhere in the green area there. And we also plan to unveil an information board for visitors. It's going to give the history of this whole complex, the RIC Barracks, and the history that all of that, which is a very interesting history in its own right. But unfortunately, it's like everything else, it costs money, and we'll be embarking on a number of fundraisers in the coming months. We also plan to unveil a wall mural in Harbour Row in honour of the women volunteers coming on over the next year also. But we need your help. Now, here's one of the fundraisers coming up. It's yours truly, myself. We'll be running the Cork City Marathon on the 4th of June, and we have sponsor cars here. Our treasurer, Hilton Richards. If anyone wants to help, either sell the lines or contribute, Hilton Richards, our treasurer, can be contacted, or Paul O'Sullivan, our secretary. So I'd ask you all to be generous in the coming weeks and months before the Cork City Marathon. We'll try and get this garden finished. I hope I haven't left anyone out in the thanks. Well, of course, yeah. Thanks, Jim. I'd like to thank the choir again, the Common Male Voice Choir. They're going to finish off with the hymn, I See the Blood Upon the Rose. Now, before they start, Peter Daly is going to give an explanation of what the poem is about.
Joseph Mary Plunkett was the youngest signatory of the proclamation. You'll notice his name was last. He was executed on the 4th of May in Kilmainham Jail in 2016. And you know the story of what happened the night before. He married his fiancée, Grace Gifford. He was a poet. There were 3 poets. There was Padraig Pearse and Tomás McDonagh. And his connection with Tomás McDonagh was that Muriel Gifford, who was Grace Gifford's sister, was married to Tomás McDonagh, and they were great friends, all 3 of them. And he was a committed Christian. And he viewed the sacrifice of 1916 in the sense of any kind of Christian sacrifice. And he wrote this poem called I See His Blood Upon the Rose. And the choir are going to sing it for you now.
Very good. Okay, that's about it, and thank you all again for coming along. And the one group I forgot to thank were my own committee members for their continued efforts. Long may they continue. Okay, thanks a lot. We'll see you again next year. Oh, by the way, there's a wreath laying ceremony tomorrow out in the Old Church Cemetery at the Republican plot at 3 o'clock if anyone wishes to attend. Okay, thank you.